Hello, welcome to Responsible Chicken Breeding, and I have magically turned Jim into Jeff. So I can only co-host with people with the names who start with J. So I got lucky, but Jim may be or may not be popping in. He is in Africa again. So Jeff was nice enough to come on and talk to us more about feed today. But how you been, Jeff?
I've been good. How about
Yeah,
you?
good. I see.
Everything's staying busy. People still loving chickens in their backyards or wherever they have them, and so
Yep. You've got
yep.
some other animal types going strong now, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, we've always done dairy and swine and beef and pretty much everything you find on a farm. And but yeah, October, November is when we do the big transition for dairy. Coming off of grazing, going to stored feeds, and so that keeps us hopping. And then everybody wants their winter chicken feed. Well, not everybody, but I wish more people did know to change their feed for winter. But there's a fair amount of people looking for their winter chicken feeds adjust for different temperatures. So yeah, it
I,
always seems like it's busy. So
I've been seeing you around. I've been seeing you on the Bread for Perfection Live with Kenny. You guys are coming back now, it looks like.
yeah, yeah,
And then I've seen you with Rip Stalvey from the APA.
yeah. Rip's a
There's
great guy. So if people don't know Rip, they need to reach out to him and get to know him. So
yeah, there's one on the breeding molting feed. Sorry, not breeding, but the molting feeds that I need to. I've watched once, but I need to watch with a notebook in hand next time. So, so, but all right. Well, thanks. Anything else you want to say or ask me?
no,
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 few because I don't
it's a
have any.
glorious sunny day, about 70 degrees, and
There you go.
so yeah,
This isn't a nicer day for us. We've been in the low, high 40s, low 50s for the last week, and
yeah, us
um,
too.
but we're gonna
Yeah,
have a good one this week. So, all right.
it's
Well,
good.
let me play my little feeding video just for fun because I enjoy
Okay.
it. And just so I'm not biased, I want to tell you all that I have prepared Jeff absolutely not at all for this, just like I always do for Jim. So he's just going on the fly. So, all right. So here's my little list here, Jeff, of places I think you can buy feed from. So is that
Yep.
pretty much
Yep,
you go to
that's
the
pretty much
store?
it.
And
I mean, I find everybody's either going to Rural King, Tractor Supply. Some people have local pet food stores and they'll go buy it there. That's the easy, that's the convenient. And, yeah, and a lot of times it's the cheaper, it's the less expensive by far. But yeah, that's pretty much. Unfortunately, there's not as many custom and local mills around that are willing to work with people and make custom feed formulations. It's sad, but
so
it's
let me put you on the spot here. So a generalization in between something you buy at your local big box store and one of the places that sells online, either on Amazon or from their site or ships it, like any guarantee that the online place makes better feed
oh no,
than okay.
no, not at all. Look, here's the bottom line for all the listeners out there, right? Everybody wants to save money, right? So they're going and they're going to go look for. I'm going to use a generic term, 16% layer feed, right? So they're going to see Southern States, Tractor Supply. They're going to look at all these different brands, and they make this magical assumption that all feeds are created equal, right? It's a 16% layer feed. They're all using the same stuff. So they're going to go with the one that's a dollar or two less. Um, Never really looked at the ingredients, never really looked at the label in depth. They just know it's a 16% layer feed. And they trust that whoever they're buying it from is making a quality 16% layer feed. And, it's not, it's really not that way. Right. And it's amazing because they'll go shop for like steaks. Well, they may want a grass fed steak versus a feedlot, whatever the local grocery store sells, or they may want, a pasture raised egg versus, so, they know how to discern quality in pretty much all other aspects of their life except for chicken feed. and it's totally amazing to me. So
Okay, so now that I think there are a few feeds out there that you don't think are terrible. We don't have to talk about those. But if you make an effort, you can maybe find some pre-bagged feed that isn't just awful.
yeah, across the country, there's a handful of ready-made feeds that have better specs to them. Like Kalmbach, for instance, out of Ohio. Their parent company's out of Ohio, but they're putting out a 20% breeder feed that looks really good, and they show you what the real ingredients are. They're not using generic terms like plant products, plant-based proteins, byproducts, etc. They're telling you it's corn, it's wheat, it's oats, it's heat treated soy, etc. So they make one, and somebody just showed me a label of one on the West Coast. Bar Ale is putting out a 20% and a 24%. They don't look bad. They're above average out there as far as feeds on the shelf. So there are a handful, and if people will take a picture of their feed tag, get a really good close up of it, and send it to me, I'll tell them my honest opinion of their particular feed. But I'm going to be blunt, I'm going to be direct, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. So if you don't like that kind of response, don't send it to me. It's okay. So
All right. Along that same note, where do you want them to send you if they're going to start sending?
Yeah, they can message me at Poultry Breeder Nutrition. They can message me, at my regular Facebook page, which is Jeff Mattocks. They can email it to me, Jeff Mattocks at fertrell.com. It doesn't really matter, however, email's easier for me because then I can expand it, blow it up, look at it a little bit closer. I can go look up that feed online, see what the ingredients are, learn what I can about the company. So,
okay, tell me your email address again so I can type it out.
Just my name, Jeff Mattocks at fertrell.com.
I know that should be easy, but
yeah,
I get nervous, so I didn't. There you go.
Perfect.
All right, so back to now. That's gonna take that off. All right, so you can still now. There's lots of people, maybe not as many in the show world as there is in the pastured poultry world that are going to local mills for just buying their local mills feed that they make, right?
Right.
I mean, each mill is going to have their own. And there are awesome feeds like that, and there are feeds that are cutting corners even more than the big guys sometimes, right?
All right. What everybody that's I've been contacted by in the show world, or or the breeder, even the breeder side is, what I find is they're buying a locally available feed because they don't know where to find the right feed, and then they're adding like B complex to it, and they're adding red cell to it, and they're adding a bunch of other things, and they, so by the time it's all said and done, they're ordering all these additional supplements, wheat germ oil and probiotics, and they've spent the same amount of money and effort than just buying one really high quality feed. But some people like to mix their own stuff. They like to put magic foo-foo dust in the water, and pixie dust, right?
Well, good. So that's where we're getting to. All right. So the next, let's just say, so the next one on there is building custom. So taking something a recipe you got from somewhere, hopefully somewhere reliable, and asking your feed mill to make it, right? So.
Right. Yeah, and there are still, in true farming communities, there's still little mom and pop feed mills that know what customer service is all about. They're not just going to blow you off. And some of them are even nice enough to make as small a batch as 500 pounds. And look, that's as small as they can go. Their equipment, if they go less than 20% of their equipment size, you're not going to get an effective mix anyway. So, most of them are doing 1 to 2 ton mixers. So anything less than 500 pounds is a real gamble as far as how well it's going to be mixed and processed. But there are still some out there.
And we've got, and just because I'm in North Carolina, and we'll just talk truth. So, Mule City in Benson, North Carolina, will do a 500-pound custom mix. And even if you want ingredients he doesn't use, you bring them to him and he'll make them. You know what I mean? Just bring him the stuff. And I think, does Reedy
Fork, yeah.
They're organic. So if you want to go the organic route, then they'll mix some custom stuff too. So, I have choices. I'm lucky. But I watched lots of people try local stuff and custom stuff, and I decided if I wasn't going to feed the big bag stuff, then I was going to mix my own. So let's see, in 2015, Jeff was nice enough. Oop, that's right over my face. Hello. There we go. 2015, Jeff put out an edition of his book for the Sustainable Poultry Network conference that actually included rations for the slow growing standard bred poultry. So see my copy, I still have it here. It's right here. It's very well worn. It's falling apart a little bit, but that's where I got my first rations that I started with to mix my own. So it's not, Jeff kept telling me all those years, it's not that complicated, but it seemed very complicated before you did it. So let me just bring up here a list of basically the ingredients needed from that book. Now they've changed a little bit over time, but if I wanted to make all the rations in that book for the standard bred poultry, I needed to find corn, 7%. And what does GRD mean? Ground?
Ground, yep.
Ground. Okay. So roasted soybeans, barley, and I think that was whole barley. Linseed meal, what is OP 34-7?
Oil pressed. So the oil's been pressed out of it. 34 is the protein, 7% is the remaining fat.
Okay.
So sorry, that's
like
just the nomenclature's from within my feed program.
Yeah. So just like the soybeans, there's better linseed meal than others. Is all the linseed meal tend to be oil pressed?
No, they have solvent extracted, which I try to avoid. So, I try to go with the mechanical pressed linseed, but there's 4 or 5 different kinds of linseed that are mechanically pressed. And it's not easy to get, if you're not in farming country, or the horse community really likes linseed meal because it's really good for horses. So you can tend to find it easier in a large horse, area.
Okay. So fish meal, we talked a lot about that. So there's definitely better fish meals than others, but we'll just gloss over that for now. Alfalfa meal, 17%. Is that pretty typical? If you find alfalfa meal, that's going to be the right percentage?
It is. I've never seen one labeled under 17. It's pretty much useless to put it in a bag and ship it for under 17 protein. Okay.
And then the for Trail NutriBalancer is the mineral mix you might recommend? Is that
Yeah.
Good choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the limestone, 37%, and I think it says CA, but this is the calcium carbonate. This is the calcium that you put in versus the oyster shell that you put on. And I forgot to put oyster shell on this list, but you also need that. All right. So I want to take half a second before you mix that is to talk a little bit, just because now that there's a supplement, I'm finding people are more confused between the NutriBalancer and the supplement. So take a second and tell us the difference and when you want one versus the other. Yeah.
All right. So the NutriBalancer is designed to help you make a complete feed. So you would add it to the cracked grains and the other proteins, etc., to make a chicken feed, right? The booster or the breeder supplement is for folks who can't make their own feed. They live far, far away, and they have some of that, big box store off the shelf type feed, but they want to make it breeder quality. So it steps up the amino acids, it steps up the protein a little bit. It really steps up the vitamins and a lot of the trace minerals. So they should be seeing healthier birds. They should be seeing improved fertility, improved hatchability, and better chick vigor. So, and that's for the people who just can't get that, custom made perfect feed, local to them or within a reasonable distance.
So for the people who want to buy their feed and add foo-foo dust, add this foo-foo dust. Yeah.
Right.
That actually has the things they want, right?
Okay.
Right. So NutriBalance, when you're talking about making feed, you're talking about adding NutriBalancer to it. All
Correct.
right. So we've got our list. This next step, this is the thing that held me up the longest, even though Jeff once again told me to stop overthinking it. But all of these ingredients, so corn, or which of these things can you feed whole versus needing to have them cracked?
Of these, the linseed meal is already processed. The barley could be left whole. The alfalfa meal can be left the way you get it. Fish meal can be left. So the corn and the soybeans need to be cracked down to 1/4. It needs to be broken into quarters. So it can't be halved like the soybean shouldn't be just halves. They need to be quarters. And the corn should also be, like a coarse cracked, so that the birds can manage it. You want all the particle size to be very similar. So use your barley as your reference point. You want you want your soybeans and your corn to be really close in size to the same size as the barley.
In case you didn't know, Kenny full-heartedly endorses the supplement. So just wanted to make sure everybody knows that. Oh, here's Jim. So, okay, here's Jim in a comment saying hi from Senegal. So, hi, Jim. All right. Okay, so correct crack size. So I do have this picture from you at some point. So that's the corn cracked into quarters, right? You want to. I think what you usually say is you want to be able to identify the everything and it doesn't look like it's.
Yeah, my standard term is if you can't pick up a handful of your chicken feed and be able to identify like 90% of what's in it, then it's probably not good feed. And this has some pellet in it where we put, all the fine particles in it, like the alfalfa, the fish, the poultry NutriBalancer, and the protein. But otherwise, you can look at this. And this looks good enough. You could put a little sugar and milk on it and eat it for breakfast. I mean, it's really, what chicken wouldn't like that, right?
So getting that correct size thing is you either get your own mill and crack them yourself, or you buy them somewhere at hopefully the right size, right? I mean, that's right. Basically the two things you come up with. Yeah. If you crack them yourself, how long, like whole corn stays for a long time, right? At good quality.
Yeah, whole corn and whole soybeans. I've had customers keep them in storage for up to 2 years, right? Without any issues whatsoever. It's once the grain interior gets exposed, once they've been ground, that the clock starts ticking. And that's where you want to use them within 30 to 60 days, or as soon as possible. The fresher, the better, right? Absolutely. The fresher, the better. And when I do presentations, I ask the crowd, how many in here like bread that's 2 weeks old, right? Of course, no hands go up. Well, what makes them think that their chicken's any different? So over time, the starch is oxidized just like stale bread, and it loses its smell and it loses its flavor. So, in a perfect world, we'd grind our feed every day and those birds would eat it so quickly, and that's not going to happen. But you grind every week, you're grinding every Saturday usually.
Yeah, I actually buy mine. I did not get a mill, so I buy mine cracked to the size that we're going to pretend I don't pellet it because that's not normal. So we're gonna pretend that doesn't happen here. So, so I'm buying the cracked corn already and actually using soybean meal at this point instead of.
But you're using expelled soybean meal.
Yes.
So let's clarify.
Yes.
It's mechanically pressed. It still has 7% residual oil remaining in it.
Yep.
and it smells wonderful compared to soybean meal that's been solvent extracted. So
I got lucky. I met you before I ever bought a bag of soybean meal, so I've never
yeah,
smelled the other. Because, but it took a long time. That Mule City in Benson, that was the only place I could find it. So that's what I've been using. So, all right, let's go back to our ingredients. All right, so I showed the book from 2015, but you've updated your book now to a new edition.
yeah,
And
fourth
so,
edition.
yep. And
Right.
so some of the recipes are a little different. And some of them are exactly the same, but but the big difference I saw in the pastured poultry section was we've now stopped the calcium recommendation and we're moved on to something that starts with an A that I can't pronounce.
Yeah, aragonite. And the reason aragonite is very much like oyster shell. So if you want to use oyster shell, that's fine. Particle size on oyster shell is too large for baby chicks and immature birds. But so aragonite is also known as Bahama sand. So all those white sandy beaches down, southern Florida and through the Bahamas are pieces of seashell and coral that get dropped off. The fancy word is they precipitate out of the Gulf Stream as it passes around the tip of Florida, right? So they accumulate there and they're naturally, you know, so it's a replenishing source of calcium, but it came from a once living creature, which means it's going to be more easily digested by the chicken or any animal that's consuming it. So just think of it, it's sand particle size, but it's really the same, actually a little bit better than oyster shell. But the ocean drops it off, and it's going to keep dropping it off for the next however long, until the Gulf Stream changes. So, and actually, in some cases, the aragonite gets in the way of ship traffic and boat traffic down there. So they need to dredge it out of the way anyway. So here we can reutilize it. Nature's giving it to us in a readily used form. And
Is that pretty standard? Like if you find a bag of that stuff, is it good stuff? I mean, do we have to worry about buying poor
yeah,
quality?
I haven't seen it mislabeled anywhere so far. There's only a handful of people bringing it into the U.S. and packaging it for sale.
Okay.
When in doubt, again, just like the feed, people can take a picture of it, send it to me, say, "Hey, is this the right stuff?" And it's great for aquariums. It's great for, it's awesome in the garden, for people that are gardening as well. So it's a really fabulous product.
You all at Fertrell aren't selling it yet, are you?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah. We've sold aragonite for as long as I can remember.
Okay. So, oops, sorry about that.
It's okay. Yeah. No.
I've been having trouble finding it. Now I know how. All right. So at this point, if you have the book and you know what size things, you basically can make a bunch of feed stuff without bothering Jeff, right? I mean,
well, you can, and back in the appendix is also a tutorial on how to make your own feed. So if you wanted to experiment, if you're a math and numbers geek like me, you could sit down with a calculator and a big tablet, and you could have at, try your hand at formulating your own feed. It gives you the limitations and yeah. So it tells you, not to exceed this amount of wheat, not to exceed this much amount of barley. So it's got a lot of safety measures in it, and not only like, since the book ever came out, it's like I've only had 6 people talk to me about making their own chicken feed using the appendix. Not too many people are that kind of crazy, numbers geeks that do such things, but it's there.
And you've got rations in here for standard bred poultry. You've got rations more for meat birds, and then you also have like layers, like pastured layers. So you're looking more at like sex links and stuff like that.
Yep.
Are there any? Not that you know your breed super well, but I just insulted you. I didn't mean it that way. Like, would any of the standard bred birds be more like sex links? I mean, if you're feeding leghorns or some of the smaller, like?
Yeah, pretty much any, like your prolific layers that are in that 3.5 to 4.5 pound range, that 4 pound mature bird, that's going to give you over 200 eggs a year. They're going to feed very much like, believe it or not, most of the standard breds will function very well on my, regular layer feeds, for instance. Only because we have higher vitamin levels than most of the feeds on the market, and when I balance a feed formula, I'm always well over what the bird actually needs. I hate to gamble with your success or the birds, so I tend to over formulate, and that gives me some fudge room in there, that'll help. So there's a lot of people doing, breeds very much like yours, Karen, and they find they're happy with like my 17% layer feed, and they do very well with it.
And I moved to that after I'm done hatching. So there's a breeder layer with more stuff going on for hatching purposes, right?
Right.
And then when I'm done hatching, but while the birds are still laying, and I want them to keep laying, so I moved to the layer feed in the pastured section.
Yeah, the basic layer feed, and it's right. And the key differences there: the vitamin A levels higher, the vitamin E levels higher. Pretty much all the vitamins are higher. The amino acids are higher, because we're trying to get every egg to hatch that we can. And your money at that point is in hatching eggs. When you're selling birds and or eggs, so we're trying to focus on that. And breeders are looking at how many eggs they can hatch. Right, it gives them a larger pool for doing their culling and their selection and all that. So
yeah. All right. Well, I'm not very good at transitions, so now we're going back just to real quick, just making the actual feed. Like I said, Jeff kept telling me it wasn't complicated, and I kept not believing him. But when I sat down to write it up, I'm like, okay, you need to have a bucket for all the ingredients, and then you need to weigh it and mix it together. So that's really all. So I have a simple scale. I did look for one that went to the second digit, because when you get the feed formulas from Jeff or from the book, they're going to be in 1 ton, distinctions. So when you multiply that down to 50, 60, 70 pounds, then, you might end up with 0.875 of something. But Jeff also tells me, don't worry so much about the third digit in.
Yeah.
So, but
no, not even hardly. So
I just weigh out. I have bad eyesight, so on my clipboard back there, I printed out really big what my numbers are for each for each thing, and then I mix it. There's any variety of mixers depending on how much you want to make at a time. This is the sort of normal cement mixer from Lowe's that I can mix 70 pounds in there without spilling out the front. So that's now I'm making 70-pound batches. I just like the tall one because it can dump down all empty without having to go underneath it into things. So I put it in. You want to explain just a little bit about the order of the ingredients, Jeff, and if you're adding anything else that's not in the recipe?
I'm not really specific on the order, but normally, like, you put in your largest ingredient last, right? So you'll put in something like your protein, and then you'll add your powders to it. So whether you're using soybean meal, roasted soybean, etc., put that in. If you're adding oil or a little bit of molasses to help it stick, put your powders in. Let that mix for a couple of minutes, and then you always put your largest single ingredient, which most often is corn. Then so that you'd put in your barley, you'd put in your wheat, then you put in your corn. Once your last ingredient's in, you pretty much want to set a stopwatch or something, or a timer, not to go past 5 minutes, because you can overmix it. So if it's in there too long, it'll start unmixing itself again, and you'll end up with a lot more powder. So 5 minutes is usually good once the last ingredient's in.
And then you stop, and ta-da, you've got chicken feed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ta-da. Yeah. You stop, you dump it out, and in your case, you put it through the pellet mill.
Yeah.
If you like a mash feed, just keep going with the mash feed, and it's whatever your chickens are used to and what you prefer. Karen likes the pellet, and
I'm considering changing. That's what
that's
we're here
okay.
to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Actually, if there's just a way to combine the fines, which is what we're going to be talking about today, really
yeah.
is if we can do that mix with protein and the fish meal and the alfalfa meal and the poultry nutrient balancer, etc., if we can turn that into a pellet, then we can have a combo feed of pellet and cracked grains, and it looks gorgeous. You showed the picture earlier, so that's what it looks like, and people can blow it up and take a look at it.
The one thing just for mixing your own feed, you will on the other end. It doesn't come out in nice little bags for you to carry around and keep in the truck. So, so you will need to figure out some way you're going to store it. I bought that little tiny feed mill there on the top. I think it holds about 300 pounds. And it's tall enough to empty out into buckets. So I have 2 of them now. So like this time of year, it has cockerel feed and cockerel feed in one, pullet feed in another, and then my breeder holder and my layers, I put those in the smaller little 13-gallon, but those 13-gallon blue barrels with the nice lids can sit out in the elements. Like they don't leak. The water doesn't get into them. And I don't have bears. So lucky
as long as you
there.
put the lids back on, right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, exactly. And as long as you take the lids off correctly when they're full of water, then it doesn't get in there. But those have been nice for me. And I, like I said, so I have 2 things with a lot of feed, and then the other types I just put into the barrels directly. So that's all. Just make sure you got something figured out for the other end, because
before we move on, we should actually back up, because you just said something that people need to realize. When you're making your own feed like you are, you now have that ability to make a cockerel feed and a pullet developer feed, which are different, right?
Yeah.
And you're hitting very specified nutrient requirements, for each, because they really don't get the same feed, but that's okay. A lot of people don't have that choice, but I mean, you can be that precise. I mean, you can make adjustments. If your egg size is too big, too small, you can reach out to me and I can say, okay, increase or decrease the protein, do this, do that, right? So we can control egg size. We can do a lot to control body weight. It's the flexibility of making your own feed is, it's huge if you have the time to do it and do it right.
Yeah.
So
that's true. So just we did the show on that before, but what are we talking about? You're talking about a chick feed to start for, I'm just going to say 4 weeks. Break it down the first third of their life.
Yeah.
Then you switch it over to a chick grower.
Yeah.
For the next third, and then there's a third level of chick feed, or is that under the pullet? I forget.
Well, that's your developer phase.
That's the developer. Okay,
So, right. So that's where you would split the cockerels from the pullets. It's somewhere around 12 weeks of age, right? Who's who and so on. So you separate them. You feed the cockerels one way, and you feed the pullets one way.
Yeah.
So that they're developing, very scientifically and precisely.
Yeah. So I'm leaving them on that until basically they start laying, or they go bye-bye. And then straight onto a layer feed if I'm not breeding from them, and onto a breeder layer if I am. And then, like I said, when I finish hatching, everybody just goes onto the layer feed until the laying is done. And then you can go on to a molting diet or a holding diet. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, not a lot of people are actually doing a good, clean, controlled molt. It's not easy. Of all the feeds to manage, to do a true molting diet is not easy. And and you feel like you're starving them to death. And look, you love your birds, so it's going to be really hard. You're feeding them a low energy, low protein feed, really high in calcium, really high in vitamins and minerals to rebuild their bone mass. So when they start laying again, they can lay good, hard eggshells. But we're trying to lose 20% of body weight, right? And get them back down to their pullet weight.
I feel like for me, I wouldn't feel like I was starving them if I was still providing them with food. So that's where the molting diet makes it something I feel like I'm going to try one of these years when I'm doing less things.
But well, you just go out there and they act ravenous, like you haven't fed them for days, and you just a lot of people feel sorry for them, and next thing you know, they're feeding them extras just because they feel sorry for them, and it defeats the purpose. So during that molt phase, trying to reduce the ovary size and actually even to shrink the testes for the cockerels a little bit. So when you put them back together for mating, they're much more efficient, right? And but trying to get rid of that internal fat
and healthier, not just efficient, and healthier.
And healthier, right? And a lot of the breeders, that contact me and they have mysterious birds dying. I have them open them up, and the amount of internal fat is unbelievable. I mean, just gobs, handfuls of, yellow fat laying in around the organs. And that's what killed them. I mean, some take them to the vet and the vet says, died of fatty liver. Well, there you go. So they don't need, they got to go through that, that week at the spa sort of thing, crash diet, lose a bunch of weight, recycle, take a break.
All right. Well, and if you're truly on the show world, you have some control over when that happens. So your bird can be ready for the nationals in Ohio and all the poultry shows that happen in the fall. If you can start that early enough, you actually have a little bit more control over when they go into molt. So there's a practical reason unrelated to health as well. All right. So that's what I do now, going completely from scratch. But Jeff has developed a new product, right, from Kraut Creek. That's
I mean, it's new to as far as the world's aspect. It's been around for 6 months or almost. It's been around almost a year. But it's a 36% protein pellet.
And they call it, you don't, but they call it, I think game fowl is one word, but I've messed that up. But the game fowl 36 or protein supplement is what you ask for when you contact them, right?
Right. But that's got all the vitamins, all the minerals. It's got the poultry NutriBalancer and the breeder supplement and the fish meal and the methionine and the lysine. And, it has the expelled soybean. It has the roasted soybean. It's a really complete package. And the nice thing about it is it doesn't have all the calcium in it. So we can use it for chick phase. We can use it for grower phase. We can use it for developer phase. We can use it during breeding. We can use it when they're just regular layers. We can do it for a holding feed. So it's really flexible as far as where it fits and making all these. And then you can go locally source something like a scratch grain, cracked corn, whole wheat. I do want oats in there. So if you're selecting a scratch, I want oats or barley in there, a 3 or a 4-way grain scratch. But now we can take a scratch grain with the pellet, mix the two together and make a chicken feed, a whole lot, really simply. I mean, at that point, it's not, you don't need a pellet mill anymore. The cement mixer would still be a good idea, right? So, but that's pretty much all you need.
So we'll come back to this slide just because, but I wanted to understand more which things am I getting rid of? So this is, you just sent me a example ration with the protein pellet. And so I pulled up the breeder holding from the book, but they're not actually the same. I think the breeder holder from the book is a 13% and this is a 15%. So they're not aiming at the same place. And the corn is also a different percentage. So I don't know that.
Right. So for up in the breeder, holding, you would supply your own corn and barley in this case, right? Everything else is in there.
Okay, so that's all. So I don't have to find soybeans at the extractor the right way. I don't have to.
No.
And actually, the holding diet is one of the least complicated ones compared to the layer and all that. So it probably would be even more. So it includes. I have to go through it. Just make sure I understand. So no alfalfa meal, no soybeans, and then the NutriBalancer and okay. So but still calcium. You're adding the calcium in, right? or
So the
not?
equivalence of the calcium's in the pellet.
Okay,
So
but earlier
yeah,
you said the calcium wasn't
when you go to
something
if you pull up
fixed.
a layer feed,
Okay.
I
Okay.
put so for like young chicks, young poultry,
Yeah.
or non-egg laying,
Yeah.
the calcium is in the protein
Okay,
pellet.
because it's the
Right.
same amount. You're
Yeah.
right. When I add calcium to the chick diets and everything except for layer, it's the same small,
Yep.
negligible amount. Okay.
Exactly.
So
Yep.
if you were making a layer feed from it, you'd be adding calcium
Yep.
of some sort.
Right. Another
Um,
150 pounds per ton, 7.5%.
okay.
All right.
So you just need, and let's see, in the ingredients, you also were able to go for this on the bottom there. You were doing corn, wheat, oats, and Milo. So you were able, which is always better. If I hear you correctly, that you make these recipes for us with me just eat with barley because that's what I've got and it's easy, right?
Yep. Exactly.
But the more variety in the grains is generally a good thing.
It is. Just different forms of carbohydrates that are going to be broken down, digested slightly differently throughout the digestive tract. So you're not creating a hot spot somewhere. You're not, gambling on gout for some of the birds. By feeding just corn, eventually, and never doing a molt ration for sure. It's just you're going to have a high stepping bird or a bird with gout, or dies of fatty liver or something like that. So diversifying it, plus it's more interesting for the bird. You got whole wheat, whole oats, and whole Milo in there with cracked corn. They've got a buffet now. It's not just one thing. So I mean, the variety is important to them, and each one of the grains brings something different. Like they have their own little enzyme that they're grown with, right? It's in there. The wheat's got a xylanase enzyme. The oats and the barley have a beta glucan enzyme. I'd have to look it up, but I'm not sure what the corn comes with. We just keep using corn anyway. So um, so each one of them brings something different to the table, and also it doesn't force. I hate to use that word. It stimulates the gizzard to work more, which the more the gizzard keeps contracting and retracting, the healthier the bird's going to be. It just keeps everything moving in there, right? It's an important part of the process. So this is going to get you better gizzard stimulation, but it's going to give you better gut health all the way through.
So I haven't done it. I haven't taken the step yet to actually order. But I mean, it seems like that's half of the work. I mean, you just need a couple of grains
Yep.
and that pellet. Any problems with palatability, or do they like the pellet? Is that going to be the last thing in the dish? Um,
Um, well, each bird's a little bit different. So I'm finding, like, with the game fowl, some people tell me that their birds are eating the pellet first.
okay.
Um, but some birds just eat kind of like I do. They take a little bit of everything on their fork at the same time. Other birds eat, like my sister eats her Skittles one color at a time.
That's the
And
right way, by the way.
huh? Okay.
That's the
See,
right
so
way. Yeah.
right, yeah. So it's just like that. Every bird's going to be different. You're going to see some that just pile in on it and eat it like it's all the same. They don't really care. And then you're going to see others that are very selective. They're going to take out all the corn, then they're going to take out all the Milo, then they're going to take out all the pellet. Then, they're just going to they're going to select, and that's just the nature of the beast.
So if you're feeding a group of cockerels, that's my worry, is you're feeding a group of 50 cockerels. Do you know what I mean? Like is somebody getting only corn and somebody else is getting only pellets? But
Well,
that bird might
today,
have chosen
yeah,
that. Yeah.
no, you know what? Today somebody's getting all corn and oats,
Yeah.
and tomorrow somebody that one's getting all pellets and Milo. So,
Yeah.
and in the course of things, it's all going to even out. I don't really worry about it. The old argument about a pellet is every bite's exactly the same.
Yeah.
So
Not really. Yeah.
they're getting their guarantee, huh?
I said,
And
oh,
so
but not really. Yeah.
not really. No.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
just, and birds that are used to pellets, they're going to probably eat the pellets out
Pick those
first.
first.
Right.
Yeah.
And
You
then,
on your poultry nutrition Facebook page the other day, you listed a order in which they eat in general, the order in which they eat the stuff in their bowl. So,
yep.
um, so the biggest, and they're
It's
pretty,
almost always the biggest first.
yeah. And you've got the alfalfa meal in there. So they're pretty green, right? The pellets are a nice
Yep.
color.
Yep.
So, I can see that.
They,
How do you adjust? Can you still adjust for weather when you're using the pellet? I mean, before I would do a soybean corn swap. This is probably too personal for most of the people here listening, but
no. So
but
what we do with the pellet being a fixed commodity. So in the summertime when it's hot, we would increase the oats or the barley, or we could add a little bit extra alfalfa if somebody wanted to, right?
okay,
Brings the energy down, but we didn't throw off the protein.
okay,
And in the wintertime, we would cut back on the oats and barley and increase, the cracked corn or the Milo because they carry a little bit higher energy content. It's small swings,
yeah,
just like in your formulas, what we moved 3 pounds of something this way, that way,
yeah,
right?
yeah. It's
It's,
not a lot.
right. And it's not going to be a lot. So, I don't want to scare people that it's going to be difficult and it's not rocket science. And,
Yeah,
you know, we're just moving a little bit here, a little bit there. If we have to, we cut back on the pellet, we increase the scratch grain. So if people choose to do this and use a scratch grain, we just ease back on the amount of pellets and we up the amount of scratch grain for winter, right? So, but that's okay. So I really don't want people just kind of flying off the handle and going out there and doing their own thing. If they're going to start using the protein pellet and they want help,
yeah.
you simply email me or message me, you know,
Because that's not in the books yet. Maybe
right.
the fifth edition is going to
Yeah.
have the pellet, but
But it's like, hey, I'm using your 36 protein pellet from Croc Creek and winter's coming. I'd like to make an adjustment, or my egg size is too big. I want to make an adjustment. You know, that's that's something I do. Okay,
yeah.
that's not. I don't want people just kind of doing things, as the old folks said, willy nilly, and just kind of, So, just ask. Usually, if I'm around, my response time is usually less than an hour. I try not to keep people waiting any longer than I have to. So,
That's the first thing I said. When I messaged him, I'm thinking about switching over to using your pellet. Are you ready to make me 12 new rations? So he said, "Yep."
yep, not a problem.
I assume that many of them, but I feel like that for your first one, when people contact you for the first time, I feel like the first thing you asked me was, "What do I have access to?" And I wasn't ready to answer that because I didn't know what I needed to find out what I had access to. But um, that still is going to be the same sort of way when you got the pellet, right? If they need
Yeah.
to find out if they're using a scratch grain or if they want to buy the grains individually, or
Yeah, I mean, if they'll buy the greens individually, that's like primo. That's perfect. That's the way to go. Because then I can be really precise on the amount of corn. If you back up to that formula that you had there a little while ago, with so much Milo, so much wheat, so much, right? And that's pretty much the formula I'm going to give you if you had those ingredients. If you don't have them all, that's fine. I can adjust accordingly. To me, oats are a must, and they're never going to be higher than what you see there, 20% of the diet. Um, Birds love the whole wheat, and whole wheat brings some extra B vitamins with it, so it's a win-win. Of course, the birds are going to love cracked corn because they're chickens, and so it's not hard. And just moving a few things around in different directions. Um, yeah, it, it's really not that hard.
it isn't now that I've done it.
No,
Like I
yeah,
said, all those years of resisting. So your fat in here, so you're adding some sort of liquid, right? That soybean oil is a liquid.
yeah, it's a liquid, and um, this one looks like it's a fall or winter,
Yeah.
cooler season one, and so I'm adding that. Added fat is energy. right? It's twice as much energy. It's over twice as much energy as corn has in it. So, that 25 pounds is like adding 60 pounds of corn to this recipe. It's pretty substantial. The other thing is the oil makes it all like the Milo oats, wheat, and corn shine. It gives it a glisten. Believe it or not, that little bit of shine makes the birds eat it faster. So if it glistens in the sun and shines, it's like holding your keys in front of your chickens. They just can't help themselves. Anything shiny, they got to peck at it. So it gives it an appearance appeal, but from a nutritional standpoint, it's really adding energy.
And so you would be basically just throwing all, I don't think it would matter what order you did. You'd be throwing all that in your mixer
Yep.
and adding your liquid and mixing it for the 5 minutes.
Right. I'd put in all the whole grains, the corn, wheat, oats,
Okay.
Milo, and the oil and the oyster shell.
Okay.
Give that a little bit of time to mix, couple minutes, and then I would put my protein supplement, because they're pellets. I'd put them in last and give them another 3 to 5 minutes max.
Okay.
So pellets don't like being abused in a mixer.
Yeah.
So the longer you mix, those pellets are going to start breaking down, especially when they come in contact with the oil. The oil is going to soak into those pellets. But I want the oil on the whole grains first,
Okay.
to shine them up, make them look pretty, and then put your pellets in.
And would you still, I mean, is there any chance you would not put the pellets in the mixer? Would you do, I mean,
You don't have to, but it's pretty hard to measure 3/4 to 1/4.
I agree. Yeah.
It's not going to mix right. So
Yeah.
it doesn't take long at that point, because you're not mixing up all those powders like you were
Right.
before. You wouldn't even need the full 5 minutes. You're probably done in 2 to 3, and
Okay.
you've got a good uniform mix.
Okay.
But you want everything to weigh about the same. That also helps with the whole mixing process, is the weight and the drop. And it can get kind of aerospace technical here if we want it to, but it is particle density plays into how well something mixes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I talked to a academic at a conference about testing to see if your mix was even. He talked about salt things and like how to taking samples from different. I was like, yeah, none of that matters to me. It's 70 pounds of feed. If it's a little bit off balance here or there, it's all going into the same pen. You know what I mean? Like, it's not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not. So just a question, because you mentioned it, the pellet and chick feeds. How do you? Is that just
That is
mixing
going to
it
be
till it
okay. So we're using a
breaks out?
3 millimeter pellet.
Okay, so
That's
what would be
something.
a mini pellet in some brands? They call those the mini pellet.
Even a mini pellet goes down to even 2, but
Okay.
3 is kind of that good, in between kind of sizing.
That's what I pellet into. So
Right.
yeah, my birds, Rhode Island Reds, Australorps, they're able to eat that by like 4.5 weeks. They can eat the small pellets. Yeah.
Right.
So,
and you're making a 3 millimeter. So for that initial, first couple weeks, I'd actually probably say, maybe put it in a bag, bust it up with a rubber mallet, so you're making a crumble out of it. And then usually after 3 to 4 weeks, they can handle it without doing any of that other processing. So you may have to, depending on the breed and the size of the chick, you may have to help them out. And you can also moisten the feed, and which will soften it up and mix it that way.
you can moisten it with a little milk. That's what
You could. You could.
That's what
Milk's
Jeff would
good.
do. That's what Jeff would do. All right. Well, I'm going to let you out of here, but I've got at least 2 questions, I think. That, so
Okay.
let's. All right. So, how long can you store custom feed before the quality decreases significantly if you have to order half a ton or a ton at a time?
If it's a mash feed, 45 days. If it's a pelleted feed, I used to just say 60 days. Depends on how good the storage is. But we just kept some pelleted feed, with Frank in Kentucky for out to 90 days, and it was still really good shape. Kept it airtight, so it didn't oxidize. Good cool storage in the shade, and that was about as long as I'd want to go. But people also don't realize that the feed on the shelf that they're buying, in a lot of cases, is already 90 days old when you get it. So
Yeah. Look for one of those brands that has a real date tag you can actually read versus calling
Yeah.
in to ask
Really.
what. All right. And then Beth also, so the oregonite sold for use in saltwater aquariums, the same as the feed additive.
It is. That's an expensive way to buy it, but that's exactly the same product. So they're finding that there's enough. You can balance out a saltwater aquarium much quicker with the oregonite because once you rehydrate it, it has algae spores and so on still in it, and it just balances out the water in a saltwater aquarium really quickly. And it's got a great purification effect to it as well. So it's awesome stuff.
Oh, all right. Well, that's so Larry says hello. Hi, Larry. So that's basically it. I want to go back to we talked about the recipes in your book, but there's a lot of talk about grit. There's a lot of talk about the different ingredients, which helped me a lot because I was not a farmer. I do not know how to go and buy, like I said, soybeans, all the stuff about soybeans, which you don't need to figure out if you use the pellet. But the different kinds of fish meal, which you also don't need to figure out if you use the pellet, right?
Right.
There you go. So size of grains, all that's in there, your grit problems. And then right now the pellet is available right at Kraut Creek in Ohio. So they'll ship it to you. If everybody in the world starts making their own feed, maybe we'll get another mill to kick in on this. But right now we need to buy it, support them, make them keep making it. So, but I got nothing else. You got anything else, Jeff?
Well, George would make you the pellet. I can send George but
we don't need to. We can stick it.
okay, yeah,
because anywhere. Okay, so say you want the pellets, right? Say you want to be the person who. I shouldn't say this because I want people to buy it from Kraut Creek. But if you want to be the person who spearheads it in your area in Southern California or something, then you can get a feed mill and probably for the 1,000 pounds, maybe they would make it if they can pellet it, right? But a lot of local feed mills can't pellet anything, right?
right. On the East Coast, a lot of local feed mills can't pellet anything. They never bought the pelleting equipment. They didn't set up their mill. Everybody on the West Coast pellets, but they have a 3-ton minimum. They won't even talk to you about a custom mix if you're not doing 3 tons. But I am working with someone very much like yourself on the West Coast. He purchased the same pellet mill that you did, and he is pelletizing the equivalence of his is a 33 protein pellet, very much like the Kraut Creek out on the West Coast. So if there's people on the West Coast looking for something like this and don't want to, ship it all the way across the country, they can go to California Custom Game Fowl Feeds on Facebook. It's Chino Gonzalez. Give him a call, connect with him. He's making the pellet. He's making a complete feed, and he's willing to make custom complete feeds for folks if they want to, if they're interested in getting their own feed made.
So, all right. Rip here. And if you're not part of the Gold Standard Poultry Solutions, you should join that on Facebook. But
absolutely,
the more he listens to Jeff, the more he learns. So I appreciate you coming on, Jim. Have fun in Africa. Maybe we'll be back next week. Maybe we won't. We'll find out. But I appreciate everybody who showed up and asked questions. And Jeff, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for asking me. I had a good time.
All right. Goodbye. Goodbye. As soon as I find the thing to play. There we go.